Father Wagner, your gift of public speaking is appreciated by your audiences, no matter where you speak. So when did you start speaking, and how has the gift evolved for you in your professional life and your personal life?
I had my first experience public speaking in the 7th grade. And I was originally born on a farm in Lima, Ohio. And we raised pigs, and I guess I would speak to the pigs at times, but they would never really respond to me. And what happened was my dad also on the side worked for IBM, or the farm was really a side project. And when I was 12 years old, we ended up getting moved to Dallas, Fort Worth, Texas. And I was in 6th grade then. And, I had been in plays and things like that for PTA sort of things up to that point. And I remember in 6th grade, I had a line in our Christmas pageant. I think I said, "Hey, look, it's snowing," which didn't make any sense because we were in Texas, and of course it never snows there. And when I went into junior high school there in Texas, I took a speech class because it was offered, and everybody talked about how great this teacher was. And I'd actually like to find this guy. His name is, but it's really impossible because his name is Michael Irvin. And there was a Michael Irvin who played for the Dallas Cowboys at the same time that we were all living there. So if you Google Michael Irvin and Dallas or Fort Worth, you get the football player, not the... And he was a spectacular, he's one of the most important influences on my life in terms of speaking. Because I would have to say that while my style has evolved and I've gotten better and things throughout the years, that I still use all the basic things he taught me. I still tell the same... In fact, one of the stories that I tell is about pushing a big red button and turning off all the computers in my dad's office. 3 buildings worth. Now when I do it, people think I'm really strange. And on the side, though, my dad worked for IBM. And when I was 11 years old, IBM had this downsize, and they gave my dad an option to either move or lose his job. And that's when we found out that IBM stands for I've been moved. So we ended up moving down from the farm to metropolitan suburban Dallas-Fort Worth, Texas, which was very strange because my closest neighbor was a quarter-mile away on the farm. Now in Texas, my closest neighbor was right there. I could see into their window. I didn't do that kind of thing, but at least the police never caught me. Just kidding about that. So I didn't know anybody there, so I would spend time with my dad at the office. And my dad worked at this place in Irving, Texas. It was a huge place, a huge computer, 3 buildings of computers. It's still down there. It's a big hub for IBM. And he would take me with him, and we would go to this computer room, and the computer rooms were like 5 times the size of this room. And they were filled with computers and mainframes and air conditioners and high tech, and it was, you had to get through security. And my dad would take me, and he'd be working, and he would set me in front of a terminal. And I would play, I'd bring a diskette and play with the computer game. I was quite content to do that because, I'm a self-proclaimed nerd, so this is what heaven, I believe, will be like, is a giant room of computers. So I was very content. And I actually, I played for a couple hours on this particular day, and it was neat to be surrounded by all this stuff, and I had to go to the bathroom. And it happens. And I said, "Dad, I have to go to the bathroom." And he said, "Well, thanks for telling me, son." And I said, "What do I do?" And he says, "Well, what you do is the bathroom's out that door." He pointed to a door. It's to the left, and just when you want to come back in, push the button on the outside of the door. And I wasn't really thinking. I'd let it go way too far. It was hurting at this point. I wasn't thinking straight. And I said, "Okay, thanks, Dad." So I began to walk out of this giant hub of IBM. And as I'm walking toward the door, I see a button by the door, and I'm thinking, Dad wants me to hit the button beside the door, right? Well, the button, to illustrate, looks something like this. This is a Staples Easy button, but take off the Easy, and it was just a giant red button on the side of the door. Let me tell you something. I learned many lessons that day. The first lesson that I learned was you never push a button that looks like this, ever. Ever. Especially if the big red button has a cover that you must remove first. So all I heard my dad say was push the button by the door. I wasn't really listening to him. So I went up there, I'm like, well, this must be the button you want. And I had to lift up the cover. And it wasn't quite this big. It was about that. It was still a big red button, like the kind you would expect to launch nuclear weapons across the, should have had an indication that day. I knew better. I was a big enough nerd to know that at the time. So I lifted up the cover and I pushed the button. All the lights went off in the room. All the air conditioners went off. All the computers went off. It was the emergency cutoff button for the entire complex. And I remember looking over at my dad in the dark, and he looked up at me and said, "What did you do?" And I said, "I pushed the button by the door." He said, "The one on the other side of the door," which was the doorbell to let me back in. And I said, So what he did is he took me to the bathroom where I stayed for the next 4 hours. I got to know everything about the bathroom. And let me tell you, I know what hell will be like. If heaven is like a computer room full of great, awesome things, hell is a bathroom for 4 hours where there's nothing to do but test all the faucets and see how much toilet paper you can stuff down a toilet, it's 3. So I sat there, and I was freaking out. And hours and hours passed. And my dad didn't do that. I wasn't in jail, but he was trying to fix this problem because not only had I shut down all the mainframes in that room, I shut down 3 other buildings as well with that push of the button. And there was a memo that came out, by the way, two weeks after that, saying family members are no longer allowed in the area. He could have lost his job. Luckily it was a Sunday afternoon, and they called some people in. They got things started back up. And I don't know how they did it. I know when they did it because I was in the bathroom for 4 hours. And so I sat there and I got to thinking of things, and I was so worried that I thought it was the end of my dad. I thought it was the end of my family. I thought it was the end of me. My dad was a very nice guy, but even this was a little too much for my dad to handle. At the end of the 4 hours, he comes in and he says, "How are you doing?" And I said, "I'm a nervous wreck." And I said, "And all the sinks work," is what I told him. And I told him that I said I was sorry, and he said, "Listen, it was an honest mistake. I should have been more clear. You didn't know what was going on there, and I probably would have done the same thing." And he said, "I just want you to know that I forgive you." And I thought, wow, I thought that was really good. And he said, I said, "Are you going to lose your job?" He says, "I don't know. I don't think so, but he didn't know at the time." And so we went home, and the memo came out, and life kind of went on at that point. And the reason I tell you that story is for a variety of reasons, because it's one of my favorite stories.